So, last video, we talked about this mega poll of polls that came out on Monday morning in the Telegraph, led, of course, by David Frost, commissioned and done by YouGov, and, of course, funded by a group of concerned Tory donors called the British Conservative Alliance. Never heard of them before until Monday morning. I can assure you of that, as probably did many other people as well. But as we went through that particular poll, it was very, very clear what the intent and purpose of this was, that we want to push the party ever more further to the right by trying to sort of scare people into, or at least Tory voters, because after all, it was in the Telegraph, also known as the Tory graph, to push them further and further into the camp of being more and more hard right. That was the only way to win an election, by somehow taking all the votes away from reform, because again they're still panicking about reform UK, as we've talked about before. It's the eternal nightmare the Tories seem to have. They cannot seem to get rid of the spectre of Nigel Farage, no matter how far, and by this point he has proven, honestly, not to be a political force at this point anymore. But they are still terrified. They are still scared of, oh no, we're going to lose all those precious Tory votes, and we're going to end up in an awful, dismal state. But of course, they ignored tactical voting and other things as well. But today, we're going to have a look at what Conservative Home thought of that particular Tory, this shall we say, particular, shall we say, mega poll of polls predicting the complete doom of the Tory party. Because out of this, they suspect something even more sinister. They are suspecting that this could very well be the potential of a start of a leadership challenge, or something akin to a push to change leader before the general election. And remember, there were a lot of polls back in the day, just after Rishi Sunak came in, where a lot of people were predicting Rishi Sunak doesn't make it to the next general election, or he isn't the Conservative leader that takes the party into the next general election. Now, if you look at polling intentions, as we've done many, many times, when you look at sort of Conservative Party polling, Kimi Badnoch is the leader. And trust me, if if you think Rishi Sunak's doing a bad job, trying to save your party by putting Kimi Badnoch in place, yeah, that's not going to save your party either. She's even worse than Rishi Sunak, that's for sure. But that's what they probably want, which is probably even more terrifying. Or they may have another candidate in place who they think might be the better pick. We'll see. Maybe as the lesson should be learned that, Sunak was just not experienced enough really to take this position, especially when it comes to, party leadership. And trust me, Kimi Badnoch is not going to have an easy ride either. The idea that she will become some sort of good leader, absolutely not, when you've had the right of the party already come out and say you will never be leader of this Conservative Party, especially when they are so powerful at the moment in what it would be a potential, of course, Tory leadership election. But let's get down to business, and see what Conservative Home thinks of this. Essentially saying the game's afoot, things are happening. And of course, when things are happening, when they have predicted stuff like this in the Tory party, which is a big reason why we often go and look at Conservative Home, they are more often right than wrong. So if Conservative Home are suspecting a potential leadership challenge, then it could be very well on the cards. But before we do get to that, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a notification link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, the YouTube thank you button, the YouTube subscription thing that we as well called the Pony Club. So, thank you very much to everyone who does, again, help and support the channel that way. And of course, you can help out just by clicking the like and share button. And of course, if you are new to the channel, click the subscribe button for more wonderful, fun stuff with the ongoing activity and probably stuff about to hot up leading into a potential UK general election. So, if you want to see more of this type of stuff and content, click on the subscribe button. So, over we go to Conservative Home, because, oh boy, are they suspecting a leadership challenge here. So, the Daily Telegraph has cleared its front page today for a constituency-based opinion poll, suggesting that the Conservatives face a 1997-style general election defeat. But that's just the start. As I write, other related stories on the Telegraph's online page include Jeremy Hunt, amongst 11 cabinet ministers, predicted to lose seats if election due today, how Reform UK will shatter the Tories without winning a seat, and Sunak's immigration ineptitude has caused Leave voters to ditch the Tories, by our columnist James Johnson and LJ Partners polls. So, even indicating that people who normally write for Conservative Home are also jumping on this as well. And given, of course, the title of those articles, you can see what they are trying to do, as we discussed last video. And of course, the breadth of the Telegraph's print splash was the opinion piece by David Frost under the headline of "Stunningly Awful Poll Must Shake Sunak Out of His Complacency." So, who has commissioned this poll, which the paper is devoting so much reporting and commentary? Well, the poll was commissioned by a group of Conservative donors called the Conservative Britain Alliance and carried out by YouGov, working with Lord Frost, the Telegraph reports. And as I've said before, up until Monday morning, no one knew of the Conservative British Alliance. No one had ever heard of it before. It's just sort of sprung up seemingly out of nowhere. But they continue. I smell a rat, or the 7th Cavalry, depending on one's view. The poll does take time to research, but can be published quickly. It can be served up for the most suitable moment in the view of those who have commissioned it, and perhaps also willing to obviously publish it. So, what's taking place in Parliament this week that might explain why now? Frost article, of course, provides the answer, saying that 3/4 of the voters who have left us are Leave voters. Even now, this group puts the Tories ahead of Labour on the economy. The big problem is immigration, legal as well as illegal. This is why this week's vote on Rwanda is so important. As we talked about last time, this is the red herring. This whole idea, the big if, that somehow if you tilt right, all these voters are going to come back to reform, ignoring, of course, tactical voting. And other experts who said, there are other problems that they are ignoring, seemingly in this poll. Also ignoring the fact that voters don't trust the Conservatives on immigration, and that the economy and the NHS far more important than immigration. Immigration is not even in the top 10 anymore of voter concerns. But there you go. So, Conservative Home will also have more to say about the rights and wrongs and the ins and outs of the safety of Rwanda and the asylum and immigration bill later this week. But for the moment, let me explain simply how the land lies. Essentially, a group of Conservative MPs on the party's right want to see the bill made more restrictive, and another is on its leftless, or at least no more restrictive than it is now. Robert Buckland puts the manner of the case on the site this morning, and expected to see another MP from the other one during the next couple of days. The bill's obviously third reading is due to take place on Wednesday after 2 days of the committee stage consideration. That fact, plus a bit of briefing and speculation, may or may not be accurate, which suggests the government is minded to take no amendments at all from either wing. And that is going to cause massive consternation as well. Massive consternation, because the right were, how the right were essentially placated into not killing this bill in the first place, was because they were allowed to amend this bill, that they could go on and amend this bill, that they could make it harder, or at least more, more right wing. So if now they're not being placated, now their amendments are being ignored and not listened to, they ain't going to vote for this bill. They are going to try and, go full fire and fury. All the five families going to be out there doing what they can, and eventually, as we are about to suspect, well, maybe it's Rishi that's the problem, not the party, not our right wing ideas. No, maybe it's the party that's the problem, or shall we say the leader that's the problem. So there is, of course, the sense that Rishi Sunak wants to get this bill through Parliament as quickly as possible, and hopes to see it survive its legal challenge that can again get some flights off to Rwanda and turn a developing general election campaign into one focusing on the economy and the message of stick with the devil you know against Keir Starmer's one of time for change. That's all very well, but the bill has to get through its third reading first. And here is where the Frost poll and those mysterious donors of the Telegraph splash comes in, as well as the most recent coverage. Consider this report from yesterday. The leaders of the three biggest groups on the Conservative right have now united to warn Sunak that they will vote against him on the Rwanda bill this week unless he gives ground. Danny Kruger, John Hayes, Mark Francois have compared themselves to the Tory Spartans who sank Theresa May's Brexit deal, urging colleagues to join them in standing firm against Downing Street pressure. Essentially, these MPs and others feel that Downing Street promised them before and during the bill's second reading debate that their amendments would be seriously considered and washed out on the Commons, and welshed out on this committee once the second reading had been achieved. Of course, number 10 still has the option of accepting some of those amendments or even putting forward alternative ones of its own. For example, to end the constitutional right of migrants to delay their departures for many months by making individual claims to UK courts by citing any number of personal circumstances, risks frustrating the entire process of the legislation, as these MPs want. If Sunak does give ground to the MPs on the right of his party during the committee and those voting for the third reading, what if MPs on the left then decide to kick up the rough through the committee and they themselves vote against the third reading? You can see just how a mess of this bill is going to do, because even if the right wing the party does get through, you can have the One Nation Tory centrist vote against it. This is just such an insane point where Rishi Sunak has put himself into on this regard. And it is all these Northern Tory MPs, all these Red Wall MPs who are obsessed with the idea that it is immigration that is only going to be the thing that saves them. Not the fact that, they've wrecked the economy, that they've done really bad in the NHS, that they haven't delivered on levelling up, that austerity has really hit their local councils, causing a massive funding crisis, and the fact that many councils in the UK are on the edge of bankruptcy, something no one in Westminster is talking about. But there you go. So, worse still, of course, for Downing Street, is that Conservative HQ and the whips, what if Tory MPs from both wings end up opposing the bill? The government could end up with these uncertainties by making the third bill of an unamended bill a vote of confidence. Conservative MPs of this kind would be unwilling to face a general election now, but ending these risks might only provoke new ones of a different kind. So just think about that. The third reading could be considered a vote of confidence, because neither have the amendments from the five families or even the One Nation group been considered. And the reality is, everyone knows it, even though few Tories would really admit it. Even Rishi Sunak said it once himself, although he denies saying it now. this bill not really going to work. This whole idea not going to work. It's not going to be really a deterrent. Sending 200 people to Rwanda isn't exactly a big deterrent for people arriving here. When, again, you should be fixing the asylum system that you broke and creating safe routes, meaning that, no one has to rely on using small boats to cross the channel, and the system is functioning properly so that you don't end up with massive asylum backlogs. But, just a thought of a sensible way how you could be dealing with this. So, were to Sunak actually to ram this bill through in this way, he could provoke more letters to Graham Bradley demanding a leadership ballot, with the right-wing Tories now denouncing what in their view would be an inadequate bill. But if he doesn't, he could lose the bill altogether when it comes to the third reading. After all, 60 or so Conservative MPs have signed the right-wing amendments to their name, and reportedly now includes Lee Anderson, appointed a party deputy chairman by Sunak after he toppled this site's backbencher of the year-in polls back of 2022. These numbers have now built. And were the bill to fall at the third reading, what would the Prime Minister do? One logical response, given the stress that he has put on trying to stop the boats, would be to seek a general election. But that would clearly be the last thing he'd want to do, given the polls. And Number 10's plan seems to try and fight an election primarily on the economy, not boats. Which, again, they don't want to do, because this, again, it would mean them having to say all kinds of crazy nonsense stuff that Labour could just come back and say, well, hold on, you're the ones who broke the asylum system. The reason why we're having, problem in this is because you broke it in the first place. And also, play the clip of, Rishi Sunak saying, I don't think this is going to be a deterrent at all, which leaked just a couple of weeks ago. It's not going to be good for them should they go. But this is honestly where it's going, and this could happen very, very quickly. We could end up in a general election because this vote fails a lot quicker than people think. So that's why this week, watching this bill and what could happen in this is going to be very, very important. So, in such an event, the Rwanda scheme would have collapsed, and of course, Sunak would have no alternative to hand. And no one else would do either, because that would be beside the point. In sum, the situation now seems to be as follows. In the event of the government making the third reading a vote of confidence and winning it, there would be more letters. But were it not to do so and lose, then there might be more letters too. Or if it were not to do so and win narrowly, given the head of steam building up on bits of the right. So either way, as you can see from Conservative Home, there is now a serious build-up to say we want a leadership challenge. We are, this matters to us so much, because if we pass this, then somehow we survive the next general election. Again, they wouldn't. It's this whole bill and idea of sending people to Rwanda, as we've said continuously since the start, never going to work. But this is where the right are. They've just doubled down and down and down, where they've got to the point that thinking this is a good idea. Anyway, mind you, Number 10 has been and is very confident about the bill, and seems to think that the right hasn't got the numbers. I very much disagree, given how many people have put their names to back those right-wing amendments. Furthermore, I remain convinced that most Tory MPs believe that replacing Sunak with a third successive leader who hasn't been endorsed by voters is impractical, and that, were it to happen, a general election would swiftly follow. Others will disagree, as will some activists, and perhaps Frost himself, saying MPs also have a responsibility to consider more broadly whether they think the current path can take us to an election win, he wrote last year. If they don't think that, they should be resigning themselves to it. and that they should be doing something about it. So, what might that something be? The timing and the scale of the Telegraph splash is significant. And have a look at the Times as well as the Telegraph. The paper, quote, understands that Kimmy Badenoch, the business secretary, urged the Prime Minister to harden up the legislation. When it comes to the concern of cabinet members become public, you can be sure that the temperature's rising. So there is right now, I think, all reason to believe, very, very likely, depending on how this bill goes, whether the government could either win or lose, there is the big possibility we could get a general election far quicker than we initially thought. Many people said, "Oh, it's going to be the second half of the year." Okay, when exactly? This bill could propel us to have a general election a lot quicker than many people suspect. So keep an eye on this. Keep watching this and watch what Conservative MPs do and what they say in the next couple of coming weeks. Well, not only this week, but how then they respond to this bill if it passes. And of course, even then, the likelihood of it going through the Lords, not very likely, to be honest. Even then, there will be legal challenges to it. It's not going to work. Even if it does, somehow managing to send people to Rwanda, and there are flights that start going, it's not going to end as a deterrent because people will still coming across the channel. Again, meant to be a deterrent when Rishi Sunak once said himself when he was Chancellor, this idea not going to work. Everyone has said it. Even experts who know a lot about immigration have studied this, basically said, yeah, this isn't going to work. And then you've got, of course, the potential scandals that could arise from Rwanda, being the fact that, it isn't, shall we say, the best place to send these people, given its own track record on human rights abuses and, of course, targeting, of course, of political opponents. What if you fled from Rwanda and then get sent back to Rwanda? And there's all kind of stuff that could go wrong if this honestly bill does go through, but I very much doubt it will. And of course, I think we could be headed to a general election faster than people think. So let me know what you think down below. And of course, do remember to click the like and the share button. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.